when God is doing a new thing in your life, it ain't necessarily going to be the next day everything changes. Maybe that's true for some things, but there was a lot of preparation that God was doing in me to be able to have this new second chance, new career. You see God's hand in it now more than ever.
Welcome to the Christian Music Archive podcast, conversations about Christ, community, and music. I'm your host, Dave Maurer. As you can tell by the name of this podcast and the website I run, I'm a bit of a music history buff. I really enjoy hearing the stories behind the music. Sometimes those stories are about how a song was written. Sometimes it is the spiritual journey that leads a person to choose topics to sing about. But there is always an interesting story, and these stories are well worth documenting. In today's podcast, I talk with Richard Souther. Richard was an in-demand studio and touring musician who played in the early Jesus music movement with artists like Barry McGuire, Second Chapter of Acts, and Phil Keaggy, just to name a few. But early in his career, Richard experienced a significant medical event that, for all intents, should have spelled the end of his illustrious career. But thanks to some friends around him and a new technology called the synthesizer, Richard was able to resume his career and go on to be a prolific creator of contemplative music. But before I jump into my conversation with Richard, I feel the need to provide a little background. You see, I use a service that helps record studio-quality audio with my guests, even though we aren't in the same physical space. Well, that service went down and didn't work. So we had to go with a backup plan, and we had to use our cell phones to have this conversation. And then, during the phone call, we got disconnected. I'm thinking, sheesh, technology is failing me. So some of the technical quality of this conversation isn't quite what I like to have. And for a while, I was even beginning to wonder if maybe this episode wouldn't happen at all. And I've wrestled a little bit with whether I should even bring this up. So please take these words as a statement of loving respect. Due to his medical crisis, which we spend some time talking about, Richard has some short-term memory loss issues. This may come across as slow speech, and I thought about trying to edit the conversation to make it easier to follow. But I decided to leave the conversation mostly unedited because I really want you to hear Richard's heart. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Richard, and I hope you do too. So no more explanations. Let's just jump into my conversation with Richard Souther. Well, I'm honored to have on the podcast today Richard Souther. Richard has played on a number of albums from all kinds of different artists. If you go back, you can find him on Second Chapter of Acts and Jamie Owens Collins, Debbie Boone, and just a ton of others. He's also released a number of instrumental albums that he's done. I think I counted over 30 of them. And he was one of the first artists on the fledgling Meadowlark Records, and I think we'll try to talk about that a little bit too. One article I read called Richard a child prodigy, and I don't know if that's fair or not, but we're going to find out. And so, Richard, it is exciting to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure for me.
Well, I'm not even really sure where to start because you have such a large body of work. You've got classical and jazz, rock and electronic stuff that you've done. So maybe the best place to start is just at the beginning and understand how you kind of got started playing music.
Well, I guess I was meant to because I started at 3.5 years old. I lived next door to he was the ex-dean of the University of Utah, the music department there. He had retired and he'd moved down to North Hollywood where my mom and I were living, my grandmother. And he came over one day and saw that I was sitting in front of the television, and I had a little toy piano.
Okay.
And when the commercials came on, I was able to pick out the melodies from the commercials.
Oh, wow.
And he said, Catherine, I'd like to teach your son. I think he's got potential. And he became the first piano teacher that I had. And I studied classical piano with him till he passed away when I was around 11 years old. And he was a wonderful teacher. He not only encouraged me to seek out different composers and stuff and play their music, but also he encouraged me to improvise. And it was just he was just an amazing, and he was a mentor. He was just an amazing person. And so it was hard when he passed away. There was a real loss there. He was like a second father to me.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Thomas Giles.
So was he completely classically trained, or you said he encouraged you to improvise? Did that get you started kind of down the jazz path?
In a funny way, it did. Because I would take the different pieces of music, the little. It started off with just little simple Mozart and little Beethoven melodies and things like that, and I would improvise off of those. I would, as he would say, you just went off the page.
Yeah.
and so I would do that, but he would encourage it. I just had so much fun, and oddly enough, then that all changed when he passed away. My mom, by that time, my mother thought that, this is going to be a classical thing for Richard. Now he's going to move on and get into the whole concertizing and that kind of thing. And so she sought out teachers that were like heavy duty ones, and she found this old Russian fella he was a student of Franz Liszt, and it was like major guy, and but he was totally old school, and so if you didn't sight read something right the first time, you got whacked on the hands.
Oh wow.
And of course, I wasn't used to that at all. It was like another deal for me.
Yeah.
And so when and he also didn't like it when my mom came with me. So he asked her to stay in the car while he was teaching me.
That's old school.
And so, yeah, totally old school. And so I didn't have a handle on what was going on with this guy, and all I knew is that I would start to get physically sick before I did get out of the car when she'd take me to lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And so she finally put two and two together and realized that something was going on, and it lasted for about 9 months. I studied with him, and he was an amazing teacher, but the whole discipline, that kind of physical discipline, was not for me. And so around whenever it was 11 or 12 years old, I said, Mom, I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to study with this guy. I don't want to play anymore. So I gave up piano for about a year. But I still wanted to do music, and so it was around the time that surf music was coming in. It's way back, back in the early 60s. And so I told her I'd like to get a guitar and learn how to, play surf guitar. And so she thought, well, that's great, and she helped me get a guitar and take lessons. And I just didn't get it. I couldn't relate to the fingerings and, all the years of classical training and stuff
Right.
for piano, I couldn't translate that over. Other people, do and have, and that's great, but it didn't work for me. But where we were living at the time, it was during the beginnings of, every street had a garage band on
Right.
it, or a surf garage,
Yeah.
So my friends on the street said, why don't you get a little organ and play in our band? And so it was kind of like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so talked to my mom about that, and called my dad. My mom and my dad were separated, and so my dad was happy to help out. And I got a little, they called them Farfisa combo compact organs.
Oh.
And you could, it was just a little thing, but it had the surf music sound to it. And so I got back into playing keyboard through that. And that was the beginning of, I was playing in different bands from that time on.
Yeah.
Till, till I was in my late teens.
So at what point did you kind of morph into becoming a studio musician playing for other people? Because you were playing for local bands, right? Your friends' bands and stuff. At some point, you became a studio musician, a pretty well demanded studio musician too.
Well, when it was kind of a long evolving thing, the first time I went into a studio to record as a studio musician was there was a studio in Hollywood called Gold Star Records, and the Beach Boys had recorded there, and a lot of people recorded there. It was a kind of a funky place.
Okay.
But the first actual recording session I did wasn't even on the piano; it was on vibes.
Oh.
It was one of those things where it was, it was a simple part and stuff, but it involved a certain amount of technique, and I was about 14, 15 years old around that time.
Okay.
But in each band I was in, everybody, all the musicians had, the desire to want to do an album.
Okay.
This was in the 60s, Sunset Strip, the whole psychedelic era.
Yeah.
And it seemed like all the record companies were looking for the next big deal.
Right.
And so, bands were cutting records right and left back then. And so I was with several that, did an album, never went anywhere, but sure fun.
Yeah.
At the time. But it kind of, gave me an idea of what it was like to work in the studio. My real studio experience, though, probably came more in my 20s.
Okay.
Late teens, early 20s.
So you got hooked up with a band that was called a band called David. Was that specifically to support Second Chapter and Phil Keaggy, or was that something that was playing before all of that happened?
Well, it was actually, it kind of evolved. It was actually kind of a house band, if you can call it a house band. The church where we all went, it was Church on the Way in Van Nuys, California, Jack Hayford's church.
Yeah.
And we kind of became the backup band for different people that needed a backup band at the church. I think possibly the first person we worked with was Jamie Owens Collins.
Okay.
And then Jimmy Owens needed a band for a live band for his musical Come Together.
Okay, right.
Wow, that's really the one thing like.
Yeah.
The original band called David was let's see, it was Herb Melton, Gene Gunnels, and Paul Offenbacher, and myself. Herbie was the instrumental person in leading me to the Lord.
Oh.
Herbie and I, we'd been in several bands from our early teens, but it was the four of us. We had been praying about a name too, what to call the band, and I think it was Paul that said, what about a band called David? Because David was a man after God's own heart,
right?
And that's what we were at. We weren't like super musicians. But we wanted to be, excellent in our playing. And there came a time when Buck Herring from Second Chapter came up to us, because Second Chapter was going to church on the way to, and said, they had a band before us, and it kind of didn't work out. And Buck said, we're looking for a new live band to tour with us. And actually, we the four of us had been praying about the possibility of working with Second Chapter even before we were asked.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and so when Buck asked, we said, well, we've prayed about it, and the answer is yes, we'll be your band.
Very cool. So how long did you travel with Second Chapter then?
I personally traveled with them probably, I'm going to say 72, 73 to 78. I left in 78.
Well, this puts you right smack dab in the beginning of that Jesus music movement. Did you find that was influential in the stuff that you were trying to play?
It's interesting. Like with Second Chapter, their first album was all session players, wonderful session players, and so the band basically learned the parts off the records.
Okay.
And they were very particular about, they wanted it to sound like the record.
Right.
And at the same time, our first tour was with Second Chapter and Barry McGuire. We went to New Zealand. And Barry was kind of the opposite. He encouraged, he wanted the band just to have a good time and, project that through in the music. So we kind of had very structured things with Second Chapter and very loose, fun things with Barry.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of the best of both worlds for us, especially in that first few tours we did.
Well, and that's not too shabby of a way to cut your teeth, playing for Second Chapter and Barry McGuire, two very, very large names now in the history of Christian music. That's pretty cool.
At the time, I don't think the band realized it. We were honored, to do it, but they were pretty amazing folks to work with.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in our introduction, you were one of the first artists on the Meadowlark Records label. That was back in '85. That's the first that I have record of you recording your own album. Is that the start of your solo career, so to speak?
It started two solo careers, actually, for me.
Talk about
because, well, I released under my name's Richard Souther. I released a synthesizer electronic type album. Mm-hmm. And under my middle names, Douglas Trowbridge, I released a solo piano album at the same time. I'll try to make this as clear as possible. Of course, I was thinking about this today. I remembered when I used to do interviews for those records, it was kind of like, well, who am I today? Oh, I've got some Douglas Trowbridge interviews going on. Okay. It wasn't that Sparrow, the metal art people, were trying to hide it, but it wasn't like they were going to, like, you know, be too out front about it either.
Right.
You know, that I was the same artist. But it was an amazing time for me, because prior to that, I didn't think I'd be doing any music ever again because of my accident in 1981.
Right.
And when that offer came about, it was it had to be a God thing.
Sure. Well, you've alluded to it a couple of times. Do you want to talk about your accident?
Sure. I was working in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado, back in '81, January, with Phil Keaggy on a project, which I believe possibly became his Town to Town record.
Okay.
I can't recall for sure if that's. I know that he had to recut the album, so I think it was Town to Town.
Okay.
We were at Caribou Ranch. We were in our third or fourth day of recording, and this is going back for me, and a lot of it's hazy. But I got I had a bad tuna fish sandwich.
That's that tuna fish for you, I tell you.
Tuna fish, whoa.
Yeah.
That was the tuna fish sandwich that changed my life. And at the time it happened, all I remember is that, yeah, we were, if it was our third or fourth day, I don't recall. I just know that it was probably, late at night, and we had finished recording for the day. And underneath the studio was a kitchen, and I went down and saw a bowl of prepared tuna fish, and thought, because I hadn't eaten most of the day, and I thought, I'll just fix myself a sandwich before I go to bed. So I saw this prepared tuna fish, put it on a sandwich, and ingested the whole thing. And the next thing I know is that I go to bed, wake up a couple hours later, room is spinning. I thought, I'm dying here. Wow. I thought this is the end for me. The guys found me the next morning, hunched over the toilet, and they said, we need to, get you to an emergency or something. I said, no, just get me on a plane, get me home.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't know what was going on. And honestly, I didn't know what was going on. I just knew. Voice inside me said, go home, get home. Don't go to an emergency. So I flew home. The drummer, Jack Kelly, flew home with me, bless his heart, and made sure I got home. And I went to UCLA, and that's when they determined I had gotten botulism. And they really didn't know what to do, because they told me that most people don't survive that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so they sent me home. My mom took me home, and it became a kind of a let's watch and see what happens. And so a couple weeks go by, and I start getting better. I start feeling more like myself, and I realized that I'm going to be able to get back into the swing of things pretty easy. And it was around that time that everything stopped. It was kind of like boom. So it wasn't like I got home and everything stopped. It was like my brain shut down to a great extent. The neurotransmitters stopped working properly, serotonin and all of that. The synapses weren't getting washed, and that's when it really kind of hit me. Short-term memory loss, speech problems. Had to learn how to do simple things again, tie my shoes,
Wow.
and forget about the piano. It's like,
Yeah.
oh boy. So for months I was just kind of huddled on the couch and going, what is going on?
Yeah.
And talking to the Lord about it. Lord, why did this happen to me?
Right.
And I probably asked him that thousands of times because of the short-term memory loss.
Yeah. So that obviously put up brakes on this music career that was going crazy. Um, when did that start coming back? Was that was there a change in your music after this experience? And kind of talk a little bit about that.
Sure, a total change because I I had to I wanted to still create music, but I needed, because of the memory problems, I needed something that was going to I got into sequencers, computer sequencers, music sequencers, and synthesizers because I saw that as a way to capture my musical ideas before I forgot them.
Okay. Yeah.
And because I would get into an idea, and quite honestly, this is still how it is with me. I get into an idea, and 30, 40 seconds into it, I'm going, okay, where am I now?
Oh, wow.
So, and if I have charts in front of me, that helps a lot.
Sure.
I mean, because, for a while where I've been living, I was able to go out and play at restaurants and things, and I had charts, so I could play things down pretty easily.
Yeah.
But as far as like creating music and writing music and everything, it was kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to need a way to capture these creative moments. So that's where I got it. Back then, computer sequencers, music sequencers were pretty primitive.
Yeah.
In fact, they were, you only had so much memory and in the sequencer, but I had plenty of time, so I just futzed and kind of got into it, saved my ideas, and then just eventually those ideas became the ideas for the first album, Airborne.
Right.
Thanks to my friend Peter York, who saw the potential there. He was just starting out at Sparrow.
Okay.
And also thanks to my friend Eric Person, who was helping me learn the ropes of computer sequencers and things like that.
Well, so obviously this has stuck with you because now you've got, like I said, I think I counted over 30 albums that you've released. That's just the things that I've counted.
Yeah.
You've been pretty prolific.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the Douglas Trowbridge piano thing is that they had already had for the Meadowlark series, the first series that came out, they already had a solo piano album from someone else, but they felt it wasn't fitting the the mood of what they wanted to do for that series. So Peter said, "Would you like to try doing some improvs, and we'll record them and see if they would work for a solo piano album?" And I said, "Sure, I can't guarantee anything." And So we went to Chick Corea's studio that he had wherever it was down in L.A. And he has this. He had beautiful Hamburg Steinway piano, and just it was kind of a dream piano.
Yeah.
And we'd gotten a good rate, to go in for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I could just kind of improvise. I had certain little notes that I had made, and reference points so I could kind of, go back and forth. And so it wasn't like, all this, here we go, 1, 2, 3,
right.
Who knows what's going to happen. But the Songs Unspoken album came out of those improvs, and I'll tag one thing on. I literally a couple days before, during the Douglas Trowbridge album, I broke the first digit on my left hand ring finger. Trying to chase my runaway dog. I got my finger. I grabbed him and got a hold of his cloth collar, and turned in such a way that I heard snap, and that digit just went completely into an L.
and fingers are kind of important to a piano player.
So, it's kind of like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
And so before recording every day, I had to have, I had a brace on it, and I had the finger numbed as well. They gave me a shot. And,
oh, wow.
Sometimes I took the brace off. Sometimes I left it on. I tell people, if you listen carefully, you'll hear a little, a little metallic sound on the key every once in a while.
We call that percussion now, right?
Yeah, percussion. So, and there's a lot of what I call pregnant pauses.
Yeah.
On the throughout the music, the record, which actually worked for it. Gave it kind of its own style. But those were pauses where I was kind of going, oh man, oh, the pain.
The secrets behind the album, the pregnant pause was not intentional. It was pain break.
And just one more thing, the follow-up record,
mm-hmm.
Same thing happened again, only to my little finger. I mean, I wasn't trying to make it happen again, but to my little finger on my left hand, I was sitting on a drum stool and fell backwards and hit my hand on the wall behind me in such a way that I broke that finger. And so I just thought, unbelievable, this can't happen twice, but it did.
So if it's a Douglas Trowbridge album, you have a broken finger then?
Yeah, 2 albums to remind me, or 2 fingers to remind me of this.
Oh, that's funny. Well, you've mentioned a couple of times throughout the podcast, and I really love hearing these stories, is that you turned to the Lord, or you had a friend that led you to the Lord. I love hearing our testimonies of how we came to know the Lord as our Savior. Would you tell us how you became a Christian?
I had asked the Lord into my life. I think it was probably 1971, around 71, 72. I had tried a lot of different things. In my teen years, my uncle was very influential, and he was a philosopher, just an amazing man, and another father figure for me, mm-hmm. and got me into different philosophers, and I studied all these different things, and then I kind of, after that, the Beatles come along with transcendental meditation and stuff. So I got into that for a little bit. A lot of things that that people my age back then were doing. Fortunately for me, I didn't do any drugs. Never did. It wasn't my thing. I kind of thought, I'd like to, at least if I'm going to play and stuff, I want to be coherent when I play on stage. But I was checking out different things, Eastern philosophies, and dabbling in all these things. I would try each one out a little while, and it seemed like things would go really well for a while. I'm going, man, this is really working for me. And a few weeks, a few months later, things kind of stopped working. This was probably close to in 70, I think it's 71. I started to get into a whole philosophy thing, almost a religious kind of deal, and it became really, really dark for me, and I was just, I was really, really depressed. Plus, what added to the depression was the band that I was with. It looked like we were going to possibly get signed to a really great deal, and that fell through, and I was depressed about that, and just a lot of different things that were kind of like, oh my gosh. So I just was really, really unhappy, and I couldn't seem to find any light in the midst of all of these things. And Herbie Melton, my friend, I had seen a real change in him over the course of a year or two, where, and you can't fake this stuff, right. And I thought, well, good for Herbie. He's found his road to travel, and I'm happy for him. But that's not for me, the whole, Jesus thing.
Right.
And but I found that at that point where it was kind of like, I don't know what to do. I called Herbie and said, Herbie, come on over. I want to talk to you. And I said, man, I just feel like everything is falling apart for me. And tell me about what's going on in your life. How did this transpire where with Jesus and stuff? I said I was raised in the church, and they talked about Jesus. It wasn't the same kind of same deal, but right. And so Herbie said, well, Rich, just I want you to pray with me and just ask the Lord to come into your life and be your Lord and Savior. And I said, oh man, I've done that before, and he said, no, really, just sincerely ask him into your life. And I said, okay. So we prayed, and I thanked Herbie, and it was a sincere prayer. I know that.
Right.
And literally over the course of a couple weeks, man, the clouds started lifting. Huh. And I was still skeptical because because of my past experiences.
Sure. Yeah.
So I knew something was going on inside my spirit, and it turned out to be the real deal. Yeah. And my family thought I was crazy. All my musician friends that weren't Christian thought, oh, he's great. He's a Jesus freak.
Yeah.
And it was like it took root, in me. And my prayers were like amazing. in regards to I really felt connected to the Lord for the first time. And I was still skeptical of, quote, organized religion.
Yeah.
And so when Herbie asked me, why don't you come and play with our little band at a coffee shop, or actually it was a coffee house, which was part of Church on the Way at the time. They would do these Friday night coffee house things, and they would have somebody speak, and and the band would play some worship songs.
Right.
So I said, okay, sure. I said, but I ain't going to church. Let's just get that straight right now.
Yeah.
So I'd go to these Friday night things, and I'd play the piano, and I noticed there was a real love in the group of people that were there, and it wasn't phony.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I like this. This is really, really great. And so eventually, when Herbie said to me, why don't you come to a Sunday service with me?
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
We'll try it.
Yeah.
And so here was my Sunday service, first service. I went to a church on the way that I recall anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Herbie and I go in. So Church on the Way was just maybe, at that time, maybe 300 people, and just literally, it was pretty small, I mean, 300 people is kind of big, especially where I live now here in Utah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was pretty small bunch, and so we're kind of sardined into the front row, or not, actually it was a second to the front, or a couple rows back, and I get literally, I get shoved kind of right, almost close to the middle, and there's a seat next to me, and all of a sudden I hear Herbie say, "Oh my gosh, it's second chapter of Acts. It's Annie Herring. It's about Herring," and I'm going, "What?
Yeah.
Who's that?"
Right.
I didn't know. And Annie Herring comes and sits next to me, and everybody starts singing, doing a hymn.
Right.
And I hear Annie, and it's like, wow, Lee's got a beautiful voice.
Yeah.
And she's got her hands raised, and she looks over at me and goes, "Isn't the Lord wonderful?" And I just kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to make of it.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of like, yeah, great. I need to get out of here. Yeah.
Right.
It was kind of like, I didn't know that. And then Barry McGuire got up and started singing a song, and I was like, he was so free, and just like it was just, and I'm thinking Barry McGuire, either destruction, I kind of didn't know what to make of them like either.
Yeah.
And I just thought, that's it for me. I ain't coming back here again. This is too out for me, because, like I said, my reference point from as a kid going to a church was like, almost, dead silence most of the time, and and a very when the speaker spoke, it was like a monotone deal going on.
Very liturgical and lifeless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I wasn't used to this kind of freedom that I was seeing, and so I told Herbie, I said, it's fine for you, Herbie, but I don't think I'll be coming back here. And so I had a couple of weeks to think about it all.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, gee, there was nothing wrong with that. what I saw and what I experienced. And Pastor Jack was great, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll just start going again. Okay. And so long story short, there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to belabor it, but
this is cool.
It's kind of like that was. I had some of the most wonderful experiences at the early church on the way, and being a part of their house band, and then being able to travel with Second Chapter and Barry and Jamie. Some amazing times.
The coincidence isn't lost on me. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's God ordained that the first two major people that you saw besides Herb was Second Chapter and Barry, or Annie and Barry, and then you went on to tour with them later. That's got to be cool to be able to say, I'm playing now with people that were very instrumental in my early decision to follow Jesus.
Yes, yeah, it really was, and it's registered more over the years. When like anything in life, you look back and you start to see God's hand in the patterns of things that happened,
Yeah.
And He gets you through, He gets you through the those times where you're going, what the heck is going on?
Right. Yeah.
And you all of a sudden you see, that was, I guess that was supposed to be. I guess that was a God ordained thing.
Yeah.
Because I spent so much time with those folks and learned so much from those years, and that I was able to apply later on in my somewhat secular life, moving out of the contemporary Christian music thing and doing going into areas and being labeled a new age artist and all of that, which I never liked, but it opened so many doors for me, later on.
I didn't use the name of the thing because I don't like the new age title either, contemplative music or whatever, but I really encourage folks to get a chance to listen to your music, check onto your Amazon or iTunes or wherever and find Richard's music. It's hard to classify because it's not really new age. It's not really, there's some electronica stuff. Like I said, there's just a wide variety of really fun, easy to listen to music that, quite frankly, I've used some of it even during my devotion times because it's just good to have this kind of soothing stuff behind the thoughts as I'm working through things that the Lord's teaching me. So I've appreciated that about your music, and I'm just grateful that I've had an opportunity to listen, and that this came out of, so to speak, a really difficult time, that accident that you had in '81 that just really kind of changed the path of your career. And it's just been fun for me to be able to be a recipient of that change that God brought to your life.
I really thought everything was kind of over for me when the botulism thing happened. And God took that and did something to me that was truly miraculous.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen quickly. I think that's, for me, it was kind of like it evolved over a period of time. And it's something that I've had to learn through the years, learn and relearn, is that when God is doing a new thing in your life, it ain't necessarily going to be, the next day everything changes.
Right.
Maybe that's true for some things, but there was a lot of preparation that God was doing in me to be able to have this new, whatever you want to call it, new second chance, new career thing. And it was just, you see God's hand in it now more than ever. At the time, I I was just kind of confused as to why things were happening. But it wasn't like I turned my back on God or something. And why did you do this to me? If anything, it was my own dumb fault. But God used it, and even in that second season in my life where I had this solo career going on, there was lots of different experiences and moments where I had to go, God, is this you? Did I made a mistake here? Did I go the wrong way?
Yeah.
Would you please intervene?
Yeah.
Because I've definitely gone the wrong way in a couple of decisions, just in regards to the circumstances, but you learn from that.
Yeah.
You hopefully learn. I learned from it anyway.
Well, and I forget who I heard it from, but it's not that God causes these things to happen to us. I'm sure there are some things that He does put in our path to help teach us, but I do believe that He uses all things that we go through, whether it's a stupid choice on our behalf or a stupid choice that somebody else did to us, or whatever, that He can use everything to help draw us closer to Him, to make us the person that God
Yes.
wants us to be.
Definitely. I truly believe that He'll use anything, that can help us grow.
I mean, he used a donkey for Balaam, right? So He can use anything.
I felt like that donkey many times.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I have a couple of other questions. If you've come to the close of your career, I'm not saying that this is happening now, but and maybe there's an author that's writing your life story. What is it that you would hope that people would say is the legacy that you've left to humanity, to God's work? What would you hope that author would write about you?
I guess that in my own quirky, eclectic, funny way, I was able to help people worship the Lord through my eclectic music, and connect people better to God through a melody, through a sound, through a texture, synthesizer texture, I guess, but something that caused them to want to basically do what I did, say, Lord, if you're there, I want to know you.
Yeah.
And, out of the integrity of my heart, I'm not just doing this for the fun of it. And I think that would be what I would hope that I could, leave behind, as it were.
One of the things we do is we send out a prayer letter every week, and we highlight different artists. What is it that we can be praying for you in these upcoming weeks and months?
Well, I've been asking the Lord for new music, fresh things that haven't been said before, and not for the novelty of just being the first one, as it were, to sing them, but something that because of the freshness, or I haven't heard that kind of a thing before, something that would attract listeners to my music, and in turn do what I had hoped, what I hoped will happen, long after I'm gone, and that's to cause them to focus on Jesus.
One of my takeaways from this conversation is the fact that if we give our lives completely to the control of our loving God, He will use us right where we are. Richard could have very easily said, my botulism has wiped out my memory and I'll never make music again. Or he could have said, this is a really bad medical crisis. I'm not even going to put any energy into going back into this, and I'm going to throw in the towel. But that isn't what happened. He embraced his experience and allowed God to use it to redirect the trajectory of his life. So often I think that we look at our hardships as brick walls or the end of the road. Well, that thing happened to me, so that must mean this isn't for me. Richard's reminder to me was to look at hardships as an opportunity to ask God for help getting over them, and maybe even to change our focus to what he wants us to do. Friedrich Nietzsche's adage that what does not kill me makes me stronger comes to mind here. More importantly, the Bible even speaks of this in Genesis 50. That's where Joseph didn't condemn his brothers for selling him into slavery, but instead said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good." Or again in Romans 8, where Paul reminds us that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I am super grateful that Richard chose to follow the leading God gave him, in spite of what could have been a career-ending event. Well, I'd like to thank you for listening to my conversation with Richard Souther this week. And thank you for your support of this podcast. It's sure fun for me to see the number of people listening each week continue to grow, and that is, in part, thanks to you. Thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends. Thanks for spreading the word, and thanks to those of you who have reached out to tell me that these conversations are meaningful to you. Keep it up. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and Twitter by searching for @CCMExchange. Or just jump on my website, christianmusicarchive.com, and you can drop me an email there or learn more about all of the artists that I interview on this podcast. To conclude this episode, I asked Richard if he would share just one song off of his new album called Waiting in the Wings. Now, I'm going to put the links to how you can get his music in the show notes, because I really think you should go pick up some of his music. But Richard suggested that I play the song For the Love of Buddy. It's a tune he wrote about his dog. And I also asked if he would provide the closing comments for this episode. So here is Richard Souther playing For the Love of Buddy, along with his closing remarks.
Something that I do every day, and it's actually connected with walking my dog. You know, I go out every day and walk for about 30, 40 minutes with my dog. But it's a wonderful time for me to just talk to the Lord about everything, anything and everything that's going on. I try and keep my conversation with the Lord going all day and all night too, if I'm awake. If somebody doesn't know the Lord, that happens to listen to this, to start out by asking, you know, if you're there, I want to know about it. And if somebody knows the Lord and is walking with the Lord and is struggling right now, just get the conversation going and get away by yourself, wherever your prayer closet might be. And for me, right now in my life, walking my dog is just an amazing prayer closet. And knowing too that God will answer you, and He'll speak to you in such a way that you'll know it, as opposed to, it may not be audible. It may be audible. Something will transpire. He'll speak to you, and it'll go way beyond your comprehension. And you'll know it's Him.